I'm making smoky Creole sauce today, and I like to think of the flavor as if like a shrimp cocktail sauce and a barbecue sauce had a baby. That's kind of what this tastes like. So it will taste good on any meats, any seafood. I also like it with like French fries or tater tots, anything that I would use ketchup with. Honestly, this is super good. I've already prepared my vegetables. I started by quartering 9 3/4 pounds of tomatoes, dicing 2 large onions, 1 cup of red peppers, and half of a cup of celery. Now I'll place my tomatoes on the stove, bring them to a simmer for about 20 minutes. My goal with this is to get them soft enough that they can go through my food mill. Now my tomatoes are nice and soft. I'll load them up into the hopper, and then they'll go ahead and go through the food mill. The skin and seeds will come out the end. The pulp and juice will all drop through the chute. And then I have a honey strainer that I like to use, and it's got a double thickness. The top one is a coarse strainer, the bottom one is a fine strainer, and then all the juice goes into the bucket. I really like using that honey strainer because it makes it so that I don't have to do the reducing downtime. I just have to get my spices in, mix them all together, get it up to a nice temperature, and then just kind of cook it to a good thickness, but it's not a matter of multiple hours the way that it normally would. When the honey strainer gets full, I like to kind of stir it around a little bit because there's still a lot of liquid in there. Now that it's nice and thick, I'll go ahead and take off that top strainer. I usually kind of tip it a little bit because more will come out. And it is kind of messy, so I try to pick a good route to my pan. And then I use my spatula to just put it in there, scrape off the backside as well. And then I repeat that process with the finer strainer here. And I'll place them back in because I'm actually going to run this through for a second time. There's a lot of moisture and pulp still in that. And then I always make sure that I scrape off the little sieve because there is lots of pulp on that. Then I add my 2 onions to the sauce, my 1 cup of red pepper, my half a cup of celery, 2 tablespoons of garlic. This is minced garlic. You can mince your own if you like, but a lot of times I get the prepared just to make it a little bit easier. 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 tablespoon of parsley, 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon of liquid smoke, half of a teaspoon of chipotle pepper powder. This is what gives it that little bit of a spice to it, so if you don't like heat, it might be a good one to omit. Half of a teaspoon of marjoram, and 1/4 teaspoon of chili powder. I'll then place this on the stove and bring it to a simmer. Now that the vegetables are nice and soft, I'll fill up my pint-sized jar to 1 inch of headspace, which is the space from the top of the food to the top of the jar. And then I'll use a clean damp cloth to clean the edges of the jars. This just makes sure that if there's any food stuff that's on the edge, that it won't interfere with the seal. Then I'll place my lids and rings on until they're fingertip tight. And thankfully we got 4 jars today because 4 jars is the minimum for pint size that you can do in 1 load of a canner. It's 2 quart-size jars, 4 pint size, so that's perfect. To prepare my pressure canner, I'll fill it with 3 jars of water. Then I'll place in my jars and lock on my lid. I'll then process this in the pressure canner for 25 minutes at 10 pounds of pressure. If I'm at sea level, I'm at 1,200 feet, so I'll go for 11 pounds of pressure. Now that the canner has begun to steam, I'll set the timer for 10 minutes to allow it to vent. Now that it's been 10 minutes, I'll place the weight on top of the vent. And now I'll watch the gauge for it to get up to 11 pounds of pressure for me. Now that it's up to 11 pounds of pressure, I'll set my timer. I usually try to keep the pressure in between 11 and 13. If it gets too high, you tend to get a little bit more leakage because of all the pressure there. And if it drops below 11, then I need to restart my timer, no matter how close it was to being done. Now that the timer's gone off, I'll go ahead and shut off the burner, but I'll just leave the canner and let the pressure come down naturally. Now that the dial is down to 0 and the pressure indicator is down, I'll remove the weight. Then I'll unlock the lid and remove it with the steam going away from me. Using my jar lifters, I take them out and set them on a heat-resistant surface. about 1 to 2 inches apart, generally speaking. This just allows them to cool a little bit better. And then later on, I'll come back and I'll remove the rings and use hot soapy water to wash off the jars. And then I'll store them in my pantry, which is cool, dry, and dark. Perfect conditions for canned goods. So this Smoky Creole sauce is very closely related to my Cajun Shrimp Sauce, but it has such a different signature to it. Oh, it's really good. Yeah, so this would go well on any red meat, any fish. You get the vegetables when you hit the celery and the peppers and the onions, so you get just a little bit of crunch there. And then you've got the smokiness to it, and there's this little tangy flavor behind it. A little bit of the garlic in there. So yeah, definitely a good pairing for meats.